The world is gearing up for Liszt's 200th birthday on October 22nd. Hector Berlioz called Liszt the pianist of the future. Brahms thought he was a wonderful composer and that every pianist could learn a lot from his transcriptions of the opera. Alan Walker wrote the definitive biography of Liszt, as far as I'm concerned, the 3-volume set. And one of the pieces, called Nuage Gris, Alan Walker called Gateway to Modern Music. I decided to do my own top 10 list of why Liszt is a very important composer. I just remember the New York Times also wondered why Liszt wasn't included in great composers of the centuries. Liszt was not only a great pianist, he was a composer. But back to my top 10 list. Number 1, now I sound like David Letterman. Number 1, Liszt was the first to coin the phrase piano recital. Before then, piano recitals were done in salons, and there were many people participating. You could have a violinist, a pianist, a singer, all playing selections. But Liszt became the first true star of the piano. Liszt was the first to play the entire piano repertoire, from Bach to Chopin. Liszt was the first to play for memory recitals, which is good and bad. Although there's a controversy, a lot of people think Clara Schumann was the first. I did a radio interview with the CBC. I was one of 10 pianists chosen to speak about Liszt, an illustrious group of pianists including Stephen Huff, Louis Lortie, Marcus Gros, André Laplante, Marc-André Hamelin, Janina Fialkowska, Angela Hewitt, and myself, so not quite 10. Stuart Goodyear as well. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. We weren't in the room together. We were asked the same questions separately, and this program is going to be broadcast on October 23rd on CBC for In Concert. But one of the questions was really interesting. It was, if you had the opportunity to invite Liszt for dinner, who would be the other guest from his time? So, of course, I just panicked. I mean, there were so many people: Wagner, Beethoven, Czerny, Berlioz. I mean, who do you invite for dinner? But then I remembered that Clara Schumann didn't like him very much, so I thought, let's leave Brahms out of it. Let's invite Clara Schumann. Then they can battle it out together, and that might make a very interesting dinner. So that was my answer. And this whole thing about memory, pianists playing for memory, I think it's going to be for another interview. But a lot of us, as we are playing more and more repertoire, do we really need to play everything from memory all the time? Good questions. During Liszt's times, the big sport was having pianists duel each other, and there was a very famous duel between Thalberg and Liszt. The media said that Liszt won, but in fact, Walker's research showed that it was a bit of a tie, and very nice comments were made about Thalberg. And Liszt was very generous with other pianists. And one of the first was he was a very kind and generous benefactor to many causes, like having a Beethoven statue put up in Bonn. He was a prodigious teacher. He taught over 400 students, and he taught them all for free. And due to his generosity, I see him as kind of the Bono of our time. He's definitely like a rock star who gave to the cause, and helped a lot of young composers and young pianists. So he was the first there. Another first was the pedaling. Before then, the pedaling was used quite cautiously. We were coming out of a generation of pianists who played Beethoven and didn't want to over-pedal. You have to understand that the pianos were different then. They had much more resonance, so pedaling wasn't as problematic as we have now to have that lovely sound but still articulate. But Liszt considered the piano the pedal, the soul of the piano. And what he wanted is to have foreign harmonies mingle in and create more exotic sounds. So you've got early water music like the St. Francis Walking on the Water, one of his pieces, and the Fountain piece. There are a lot of others. And this is kind of a prelude to Debussy and Ravel, where you have that effect. So very, very much into color. What other things that people forget about was Liszt was an extremely prolific composer, and he wrote his first opera at the age of 13. He was a friend of Wagner, obviously. Won't go into his personal life, but he presented Lohengrin. He conducted a lot of the Wagner operas. He was presenting new music constantly. He championed young composers and composers of his own time, which is one of the reasons I think he should be considered as a new music composer of his time. And he wrote a lot of choral music. The last 20 years of his life he found spirituality, so he was into more religious music. This year I released a CD about Franz Liszt, as well as a lot of other pianists, this being his special year. Included in my CD are late Liszt, like I mentioned, Nuages Gris, a very modern sounding piece, 4 little piano pieces, minimal notes but maximum impact, Vegan Lied, a lovely little lullaby that not too many people play. But I also included the standards like La Campanella, Un Sospiro, and 2 of the operatic paraphrases. Now, Liszt was well known for writing the paraphrases. I can't remember exactly the number that he wrote, maybe around 80 or something, at least 60, but in those years, the piano took the role of the orchestra, and this was a good way to bring opera home because they didn't have CDs at that time. Anyway, I was practicing the Rigoletto paraphrase one day, and my late husband, Louis Quilico, legendary baritone at the Metropolitan Opera, came in and he said, "What are you doing?" He said, "This is Verdi. You've got to think like a singer. You've got to breathe more. Let the sounds linger." That was the best piece of advice I had. I had much more fun pretending I was singing it than actually playing the notes. Another thing that I'd want to bring up is I said Liszt was the first to do all of these, my top 10 list. However, I do advise my graduate students never to say the first in anything, so I will qualify my remarks by saying maybe somebody did it first, but Liszt certainly did it better. And I think we have to remember that Franz Liszt was a great composer of his time, and if we look at it, viewing his music as modern of his time, it becomes much more refreshing.